Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Empowering Women podcast. Have you ever met a person who you just knew was special? Well, that's how I feel about today's guest. We met at a Paradigm for Parity event for Women on the Rise award winners, and congratulations because she was one of those winners. She was my fantastic table mate, and she made the night so fun and enjoyable. But Carolyn Alessi, she is definitely a woman on the rise and so much, much more. She is a regional director for Trinity Health in New England, and she's very active in improving health inequities for her community. She is also a state leader for Million Women Mentors Connecticut chapter. She's a remarkable role model, and I feel so fortunate to have her with us today. So welcome, Carolyn, to the podcast.
Thank you, Shannon. It's great to be here.
Yep, absolutely. So I'm just so excited for our listeners to meet you. And the first place we always start is we kick off those conversations, learning more about the stories of our guest. So can you tell us about some pivotal moments along your journey and that have gotten you to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my journey in my professional career is kind of like I call it a leapfrog approach. I've just kind of jumped from lily pad to lily pad. And, sometimes it was, a lateral move, and sometimes it was an upward promotion. But I think what was really, for me, a pivotal in terms of my leadership, in terms of my understanding of my potential, was me being able to really tap into my strengths and being able to understand what I could bring to the table instead of thinking about all my insecurities and what I couldn't bring to the table, or that I may not be as much of a subject matter expert in a specific area. And so once I kind of identified that, it really helped me to look at roles and positions differently, and to be able to present myself in a different way when I was entering into those roles. And so I know going into a role in the nonprofit sector, I was hired into a development role that, was a little bit of a stretch for me. But
Yep.
I think taking on that position was exciting, because I thought, well, I could take all of my corporate expertise and understanding around strategy and strategic partnerships and bring it into a national nonprofit. But what I didn't anticipate was just the understanding of how to handle board members who may have liked my predecessor better than me. I needed to understand how to, navigate workplace, dynamics when it came to competition among employees, and particularly my own staff. And so those are all things that I think at the moment I thought, oh my gosh, I'm in the belly of the fire. I don't even want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
But hindsight, it really sharpened me in a huge way. And so even in the role I have today, a lot of the dynamics that I've come across with community partners, with leadership, with even staff members, it's really helped me navigate it in a way that's allowed me to be more successful and influential in terms of my ability to, have strong, crucial conversations with leaders about certain issues.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. We've had quite a few episodes on the podcast, and it's really come back to, if somebody gives you that stretch opportunity, or you go for it, just do it. You're not going to feel comfortable. It's going to feel icky at times, but you're going to learn. You're going to be so much stronger for that opportunity. And it sounds like you've had that exact same experience.
Absolutely. And sometimes we run away from adversity. If we find it in our jobs, we think, okay, I just need to go find another job. This isn't for me. But sometimes I tell people, just stick it through, because maybe it's not the dynamic of the organization. Maybe it's you needing to grow in this particular area of your, professional career, your personal character. And so sometimes we miss those opportunities of growth when we run away and we jump ship too soon. And so sometimes I encourage people to weather the storm and see if whether it's really the dynamic of the organization or culture, or if it's just you needing to grow in your leadership and allowing yourself to be sharpened in those environments.
Yeah, I can definitely think of the flight scenario where you just want to run.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody does.
Yeah. Jokingly, I told somebody this week. when I took the role that I'm in today in my day job, that first week or two, clearly my backfill had not been named yet. And I thought, maybe I can just go back. I think that happens to so many of us. Well,
Mm.
speaking of careers, I looked up a couple of statistics. I think I shared them with you, but women comprise about 70% of health and social care workers globally, and nearly 90% of the nursing and midwifery workforce. Yet it is only estimated that they only hold about 25% of leadership roles in health, which I think is absolutely insane.
Mhm.
Given a lot of people in manufacturing and roles like that, you just don't see as many women at the bottom. You do see a higher percentage, so that blew my mind. In March 2019, the World Health Organization launched a landmark report entitled Delivered by Women, Led by Men, a Gender and Equity Analysis of the Global Health and Social Workforce. And the report essentially calls for urgent action to address gender equities in the health and social care workforce in order to reach universal health coverage and other sustainable development targets. So the four themes in their report were gender parity in leadership, occupational segregation, decent work free from bias and harassment, and the gender pay gap. So it amazes me because clearly you're in healthcare leadership. So I'm really curious, what has been fundamental to your success, do you think?
So I think there's two things for me that I found to be, what contributed to my success. And one is having a really strong, broad network. The work that I do within the community and also within our healthcare system really is dependent on relationships. It's dependent on opportunities open up if you know who those relationships are and if you've built them enough and if you can leverage them in a strategic way. And so for me, I've been able to really build and grow that network. So when I see an opportunity for a grant, I immediately know who I can tap to open a door for me. And sometimes people don't have those types of networks. And I see it in our healthcare system, especially. A lot of the leadership is homegrown. They've been in the healthcare industry from day one. And they haven't really spent a lot of time broadening their network in the community and with other corporate partners. And so a lot of opportunities are missed. And so coming into a healthcare system with already a strong network on the industry side, and then coming in and building that network in the community has really helped me to be able to advance a lot of the priorities that we're trying to achieve in our community. And I think the other thing is I've really learned how to build internal allies, inside the organization. This is something that's often underutilized, so you can foster really great, strong relationships at the leadership level if you really look to understand how you can serve and support those leaders and building and cultivating that relationship so that when you have to make an ask for something to move forward in an organization for you or to be arced up to get someone's attention so that you can move forward in your decision, it's those relationships and those allies that are so important. And that's something that I've seen has allowed me to be successful in moving certain initiatives that some people are like, that's dead in the water or that's never going to happen. But because I've built those strategic relationships internally, I've been able to go, hey, can you kind of, move this forward? Can I lean on you to help get this attention, the attention to the president? So these are things that I think are important when you're a woman in leadership, and so I have certain allies on my cell phone and I text them.
Oh,
Hey, do you have
wow.
a
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
I love that.
Our chief medical officer is on my cell phone and I'll text them, hey, I just sent this email over to our CEO. Can you go and, kind of put in a good word for me? And he'll do it. Same with other leaders. But once you build certain allies, it's amazing how other leaders, senior leaders especially, immediately give you that respect because they look at it, well, you've already gained the respect of my peer. So there's something there that allows for that relationship to be trustworthy. So I'm going to lean on that and build that ally with you as well. So I
I
think
can't
that's
take
really,
notes right now, but I'm mentally taking notes on
I think
that
that's really
one.
important.
Well, but I think I think a lot of us get caught on our to-do list. I'm going to call it that. And we undervalue the time that we connect with others and try to form those relationships so that when we do need them for whatever reason, we can go call on them.
Right, exactly. And, and that's so important, especially as a woman in leadership, you really have to cultivate those relationships and build that trust. But I think also you have to deliver, you have
Good
to
point.
be known as someone that gets things done, and done in a timely way, and that's, I think, sometimes where, unfortunately, a lot of women leaders, tend to say yes to so many things and don't deliver on any of them, or under deliver. And that really hurts the reputation. That really hurts the ability to, have confidence in the work that you're doing. So I always really try to, if I'm going to put any effort in, I try to deliver, but I also try to over deliver, but under promise.
Yes, I've learned three things. One I knew on the outset, which was build a network. You really taught me on really thinking about internal allyship and being very thoughtful about building those relationships and that boundary setting. So I knew from Brené Brown's work and quite frankly, my own development, that boundaries are really important for your own happiness and joy. But I'd never thought about it in terms of your ability to deliver. Because you're right. If you've spread yourself too thin, you're going to fall on something.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be the something you really don't need to fall on, to your point, and it hurts your reputation and your leader brand.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I love that. I'm taking notes mentally, Carolyn. I'm gonna be rewriting this down when this recording's over. And another way that you've inspired me, and I wanted to share this with our audience, is that you earned a certificate in women's leadership from the Yale School of Management, which is now on my bucket list, by the way. What were one or two key takeaways that you had from that program?
So I'll tell you, I entered into that program when I first was hired as vice president of development for a nonprofit. And in the nonprofit industry, they do not really invest in leadership opportunities for their employees. The corporate world does.
Yeah.
As soon as you hit a certain threshold, they're investing in you, giving you a coach, sending you to courses, giving you executive leadership, programming. And so I felt like, well, if I'm going to have to succeed and if I'm going to succeed in this role, I've got to invest in myself. And so when I saw this particular program, I really felt like, okay, this is going to give me some of the tools that I need to fill some of the gaps that I have. And when I entered into the program, I tell you, it was really intimidating because it was a global program. And there were women from all over the world, either owning their own business. I remember sitting next to a woman from Brazil, and I asked her why was she in the program. She said, well, because my father owns this large corporation and he wants me to take it over, and I need to know how to really lead effectively. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay, that's huge. And then to my other, side was a woman who had been in the FBI and was promoted from field to director at one of the highest levels. And I was like, oh my goodness, I am like a fish out of water. I don't belong here, And so it was really intimidating at first, but then the way they navigated that was that they broke us up into teams. And in those teams, you really got to understand and learn that we're all insecure human beings. And so we're all trying to, I hate the word fake it to make it, but we're all trying to do that, And so when we were able to recognize that and put our guard down, we really had some strong collaboration and insights that we could share with one another, and also, become friends after. I have several that I still stay in touch with. But I think one of the things that I really took away and still take away to this day is they talked about being a strategic giver. And I kind of, my ears perked when they brought that up, because I'm generous by nature. I will just sort of sometimes even be a doormat at times, where I'm like, yes, 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 I'll do this, I'll help you, I'll help. and I'll share ideas, and I'll help even people deliver on some of their own goals. And oftentimes I feel like and I have felt before I took this program, taken advantage of,
Yep.
and when I needed that support, it wasn't readily given. It was often questioned, well, why, well, shouldn't you be leaning on this person or that person? So it created a point of frustration for me. And so when they talked about being a strategic giver, they talked about the people that you invest in, that you give your time, your knowledge, your expertise, even lending a hand in an organization, they should be the ones that have the potential to move up and then look down and do the same thing. But if you're giving to someone that is just going to suck you dry all the way up to the top, then you're not going to have anything to give back down. And so that really changed how I approached my generous nature in the workforce.
Okay, there's my next lesson. Carolyn, I think this should just been a conversation between you and I.
I know.
Apparently I needed a coaching call and I didn't know it. But no, I that is great advice, because if you start having a reputation for generosity and or let's just say coaching others, let's take that opportunity. Yeah, you could get pulled on quite a bit.
Yeah. And there are some people that you think are going to be really great leaders, and you pour into them and they continue to just take. You lose so much of your time and opportunity that it really wears you down. And I see a lot of people who tend to do that. And I was doing that myself, is giving to people who really had no potential to do more than just what you were giving them. And so I had to start thinking about the people, even as I look at, succession planning and who do I invest my time in that's going to really, do great things and not just, suck you dry, for lack of a better phrase, that's sometimes how you feel.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's funny. I had an experience earlier on in my career. It was a male colleague actually on my team. And I thought he had this, I won't talk about what the issue was, but he had this issue that was impeding his ability, quite frankly, to be effective in the role and then to make any further progression. And I was all in. I was going to fix this problem, right? I was a problem solver. And I sunk so much time into it. And to be honest, he never made the pivot he needed to make. And the company actually sent him to leadership classes and such to try to make that change. So I think it's great advice. Don't always be generous and coach, but think about who you're investing that time in.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, speaking of investing time in others, my guess is that you have younger women that you mentor, either formally or informally. What advice do you give younger women as they're entering the healthcare field?
I tend to really think about what they can do in terms of their opportunity. So I always encourage people to take on roles that maybe are outside of their expertise, or training, because it can really help you look at things in a different way. So sometimes when you go into healthcare, you have one track. You go in as a nurse, you stay on that track, then your next level is to be a nurse leader. Then you go from a nurse leader to an administrator, then an administrator to a director, but you're always in the lane of nursing. And so sometimes pivoting and going in a different direction, maybe in another role, really helps make your decision-making more effective. I look at the variety of roles that I've held in my career, and every time that I get into a position, they go, well, how did you come up with that? Or how did you sort of understand what was going on? And I said, it's because I have had so many different diverse experiences that I can maneuver and navigate in a way that allows me to make decisions a lot quicker, and the learning curve a lot shorter. And so I always encourage young women particularly to try different roles. They're young enough in their career where they can do that, or if they don't want to take that risk inside of an organization, looking at community opportunities where they can grow and stretch as a leader, chairing an event, chairing a committee, being on a collaborative, and raising your hand to be, sort of the lead person. I think all of those will allow you to have more exposure and make better decisions down the road.
That is so true. Carolyn, I'm going to make you laugh. So a lot of people looked at my LinkedIn profile or a resume and they're like, why did you do that again? Because in my career, I'll keep it super high level. I've done manufacturing. I've done different roles in procurement. And now I'm on the customer facing side of the business. And to your point, people tend to pick a lane and stay in that lane, even in manufacturing. So I think in health, it might be different in healthcare, but I think there's some similarities with manufacturing. And then people like me do that, and you get kind of the hairy eyeball, like, what are you doing? But I agree, because it helps you see perspectives. You see perspectives different, and you can make probably quicker and better decisions because you've sat in the seat of those other people that you might be working with on an effort.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it just comes down to taking small risks, for greater reward, and I think that's something that, I've had to grow in, but I see so much value in doing that. Even when I was asked to be state leader for Million Women Mentors Connecticut chapter. So that was a funny story on how that even came about. I have a good
please
friend.
share.
Yeah, I have a good friend who was guarding the lieutenant governor. He was her, for lack of a better word, bodyguard.
Okay.
And he said, you've got to get onto this council that the governor and the lieutenant governor are forming. They were new in office. They're in their second term now. And I said, well, I don't really know what you're talking about, but sure. And so he said, so he made some calls, and he had me go into a meeting for the Governor's Council for Women and Girls. And they stuck me in the Education and STEAM subcommittee. And I was like, why am I in this committee? I have no idea what STEAM is. Like, what's the acronym for that? And so I sat there just really kind of like a fish out of water going, I don't think I should be in this. I should be in the leadership subcommittee. But I kept getting pressed to be in this one. So I said, okay, let me sit in this one. So I was there for about 4 or 5 months. And then the lieutenant governor wanted to bring Million Women Mentors Connecticut chapter to Connecticut. It's a national network for women who are either engaged in STEM pathways or want to pursue STEM pathways. And her and the governor were interested in building out STEM opportunities in Connecticut, and thought that this would be a really great way to do that and to build that network. And so they started off launching it in January of 2020. And I was invited as just a stakeholder to be a part of the launch. And then the launch kind of fell flat. And so 6 months later, the general counsel called me and she said, hey, the lieutenant governor would like you to take on the state leader role because the prior person really didn't, do a great job. And we really saw how much you had contributed to the Education and STEAM subcommittee. And she feels like you'd be a great fit. So I couldn't say no, but I was like, I have no idea what this is about. And I don't even know.
You're like, I sat on the subcommittee. Yeah, I came in as a stakeholder, and now suddenly I'm the state leader. How does this happen?
And I am, so for me, I almost fell out of my chair when I got that call. And I was like, are they serious? Are they crazy? I don't know anything about STEM. I don't even know what it stands for. I got the acronym wrong every single time I tried to say it, and stuff. And so I kind of felt a deep sense of insecurity of, I don't think I should do this. But I also felt like, well, it's an opportunity. If I don't take it, I'll have missed out on something. And so I accepted the role, and I convened 18 women across the state who were interested to begin with when we did the first launch. And these are subject matter experts, people who live and breathe STEM education, STEM careers, and they are involved at every single level. And I remember our first meeting that I convened. The lieutenant governor was there, and I started the meeting, and everyone just kind of looked at me like, who is this woman? We've never heard of her. We've never seen her. And of course, some of them tried to bump me out of my seat by saying, oh, Lieutenant Governor, I remember when you and I worked on this and that. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I don't know how I'm going to do this. But I realized that there is something that I have that none of the others had, which is what helped me shine at the Education STEAM Subcommittee, is I'm not a subject matter expert. So that means I don't get stuck in the weeds. I am able to look at things in a more high level way, more strategic, and then lean on my strengths of being able to get diverse people who have differing opinions about how things should go and get them to play in the same sandbox. So I told myself, Carolyn, you've done this before. You know how to do this. This is exactly the same thing. And they can tell you exactly all the things that you need to know about STEM, but you just need to be able to move them along and start getting them to produce as volunteers so that they feel like their time is valued. So that's what I did. And, fast forward almost 3 years later, we've done incredible work. We've taken that 18 women STEM leaders. We've incorporated male allies who are passionate
fantastic.
about advancing women in STEM. We've grown our network from that small 18, individuals to now over 300 people in our network. And we've done a number of events that are high impact, high power events. And, we've stood up our Stand Up for STEM Mentorship Award platform. So we've done a lot in close to 3 years. And it didn't depend on me. It depended on me being able to work with my steering committee, who are subject matter experts, and encouraging and inspiring them to lead and do great things.
Yeah, I totally agree, Carolyn. I think it's funny. I've got several parallel stories, but I think the takeaway is when you're in a situation and you don't feel like you belong or you shouldn't be in the chair, be it a role that you've accepted or a volunteer opportunity, I think you need to step back to your point and say, what is it that somebody saw in me?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that I do bring to the table? Because I've done this multiple times in my life. I had a women's leadership program at a company, and we got put in a project sub team, and it was about building a balanced scorecard for mergers and acquisitions. I'm not a finance person.
Mm-hmm.
I've never done anything with mergers and acquisitions. And I had that moment of, what in the world am I doing in this team? But to your point, I learned that I have a really system process orientation, and that helped me work through things that other people in our team were struggling with. So it's really figuring out, it may not be obvious to you at first, but it's there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that's what we have to do as women, is to be able to let go of our insecurities, our imposter syndrome, and say, okay, I do belong here. I just got to figure out what I can contribute that's going to be meaningful, and what are my strengths. And that's why a lot of times, corporations say, oh, identify your strengths and your weaknesses, and then they hone right in on your weakness. And that just burrows in that feeling of inadequacy, when they really should be saying, okay, what are your strengths and how do we leverage those strengths to make, us successful and to make you successful? And that's what I've started to really pivot towards, is how can I leverage my strengths? Yeah, I'm always going to have weaknesses, but I can't let those weaknesses, impede me from being a leader that I know I can be.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. There's actually a book called Strength Finder. You may have read it, that actually talks about that. It has you do some assessments, and it talks about that you'll gain so much more if you really, like, for example, say like you're very good at strategic thinking. If you start really honing that in and getting better at it, you actually become a much stronger participant and leader. Yeah. Very true.
Exactly.
I'll put that in the show notes for our audience if you've not done it and you're interested in it. I'm going to pivot a little bit on you, Carolyn. So I know that you're very passionate about health disparities in your local communities. I felt that during our conversation back in New York a couple of months ago. My understanding is these disparities can be influenced by quite a few factors. So what factors have you seen in your work in your local community that's impacted that?
Yeah, so health disparities are so, it's disheartening when you think about someone that can't access healthcare because there's certain barriers that sometimes either are driven by systemic racism or, other social, influencers of health, like transportation, poverty. And so in the work that I do, I actually sit in one of the poorest communities in the entire state of Connecticut, the north end of
goodness.
Hartford. The average annual household income is between $25,000 and $35,000 a year. Now, in order to survive in Hartford on just basic necessities, you have to make at least $70,000 to $90,000 a year for a household of four. So imagine, the gap, the pay gap. And, in that particular community, though they don't have strong telecommunications infrastructure, so the Wi-Fi is challenging. So when access to Wi-Fi is challenging, that means you're not going to have opportunity to look for jobs online because you're not going to have those, that internet service that's strong enough. If this particular community lacks a grocery store in their community, a grocery store.
That's crazy.
I was literally doing this exercise a week ago with a friend of mine. I said, in my town, I can go to 5 different places to get fresh produce. I can go to, the Stop and Shop, the ShopRite, Price Chopper, Geisler's, Target. And in this particular community, they have to take a bus outside of their community to go to a grocery store. And oftentimes, if they have no transportation, if they don't have funding, money to get on a bus, they're not going to have, all they've got is bodegas that have, high sugar, high fat, processed foods. So I feel like that is an injustice in and of itself, that this community is absent of a grocery store, but we see this over and over again, that in healthcare. Why do people have chronic conditions, that are unmanaged? Why is obesity such a high rate? Why are they struggling with mental health? And a lot of it comes down to their environment, comes down to where they're living. It comes down to what they're being deprived of, and so I see all of those things on a day-to-day basis with our patients, with our community. And we try to work really hard to remove those barriers or to provide opportunities for them to be able to either gain a job that makes a livable wage, where they're not trying to, as a single mom, work 3 or 4 different jobs just to put the rent, to pay for rent and put food on the table, but not be able to go to any of their healthcare appointments because they just don't have the time. They don't
sure.
have
If you're working, I mean, I find it, this is first world problem. I get it. I find it hard enough sometimes to go to my own. And I can't imagine if you're trying to raise children and work 3 jobs, you don't have time to go to the doctor.
Exactly. And so we try to look at where we can make a difference as a healthcare system, whether it be an entry point to a job that then turns into a career. And that's what we're focused on right now is how do we do that? How do we open those doors? How do we remove those barriers? If a certification is required for a certain particular role, like a CNA, can we bring them in uncertified and then certify them as they're being trained and hired? And then moving them along the path to, if they want to be a nurse, if they want to go into another track on the technical side, that we have those pathways and opportunities. And that's something that, organizations have to really think about. What are those barriers that they're putting in front of people who don't have an opportunity to seek a higher education, don't have the means to get certified in a trade and then placed. Can we open up some doors that allow them to be able to be trained on site, and then a pathway developed for them? So those are things that I think we're trying to solve in Connecticut, is figuring out how to do that. And then the other thing is transportation is a huge barrier to getting to healthcare appointments for many people. Either they lack a caregiver that can bring them and they're elderly, or they just don't have a car and the ability to get to different appointments, especially if they have a number of conditions. So those are areas. And we also do a lot of work in violence. We're finding that the root cause of violence is poverty, and that's really the driver, for young people. If they're growing up in generational poverty and not generational wealth, they're going to try to break that, curse by doing things that maybe are not the best way to do that, whether it be being involved in gangs, selling drugs, whatever it is, owning a weapon. And so we're trying to work on figuring out how to really make some policy and systems change in those areas as well.
I had never thought about that, but it would have to be. You're trying to find a way out. And probably in certain cases, those people are easy prey. I don't like that word, but like, if
They're
they're
impressionable.
yeah, good. That's much better wording. Yep.
Yeah, they're impressionable. And, what we have found with a lot of the youth that we've worked with our community partners is that they didn't intend to fall into violence or violence related activities. They just either were latchkey kids at home alone, or lacking community, lacking that community connection.
Oh man. Yeah, it's so true. I don't Obviously our audience is from a diverse part of the United States and some even global. But what do you think our audience members can do in their own communities to reduce health disparities? What are some actionable things they can do?
So a lot of communities have boards that are open to the public to join, coalitions. But I think really thinking about looking the makeup of your community. If you're in a suburban community, you're not going to see the disparities as much. And so what I would encourage you to do is take some time to volunteer in an urban community, in an inner city. Not as charity work, but as understanding those barriers, and not just volunteering and showing up, but having conversations, building a connection with these individuals. I find that sometimes when you know the people's stories, you really understand, wow, those are real challenges, and how do we remove those challenges? And sometimes we can be in a place of a power of position or influence. And we've got to be able to think about, okay, how can I use my position and my influence to help better this community? And I would also encourage people, if they have a chance, to be able to volunteer globally in more lesser developed countries, because then I think you really see the major disparities. I had a chance to go to the Philippines with my daughters over Christmas, and we served in a small village that was struck by a typhoon, and we engaged with the families there that lived in a one unit hut. Literally it was just a hut that was made up of a tin roof and then straw. And there was 7 family members that lived there. And I was responsible for making dinner for them. Well, they didn't have a refrigerator. They didn't have a stove. They didn't have running water. And so for me, coming from, the place I came from, where I live in a house, I've got running water, I've got, lots of nice knife sets to kind of slice up, and fillet a fish. I had nothing. And it really humbled me. And it really forced me to be resourceful, because I was like, I don't want to disappoint this family and not make a meal because I don't have the right stuff. I need to figure out how to make this meal and so that they can have something to eat with what I have. And that type of exposure really helps change your lens around the world and in your community as well.
Yeah, I also think maybe not the global piece, but in your community, it really starts to help you check your biases, because you start thinking things based on your own experiences, and you start really learning, to your point, people's stories. And you're like, oh, maybe that bias is not so real. It's something I've created, or the greater society has created, and I've absorbed, or a combination of the two. And it really makes you think. Oh, yeah, I love that. I had no idea. I didn't even think about internet access, because it's so prevalent, in the communities that I grow up in. And to your point, like, even if they either got a free or sponsored online class, they couldn't take it, right? Because they don't have access to a computer, and they probably don't have a library nearby that it's easy for them to access to and go take that class. So it really starts putting up all these barriers that other people don't have. So wow. Well, keep doing that work, Carolyn. It was amazing to me. And I encourage our audience, go find one organization or go have that conversation and learn more about what you can do and make the lives better for those around you. So, Carolyn, I have one final question for you. And so I've begun to start incorporating. What is one piece of leadership advice that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Gosh, there's a lot. But I think lead with confidence. That's something I feel like is like simple, but we all know in our gut what we can do. And sometimes we second guess and talk ourselves out of an opportunity to speak up and share an idea, or an opportunity to take on a major project that could lead to some exposure of who you are and your leadership. So I say lead with confidence. If your gut is telling you, hey, you should raise your hand and do this, do it. And if you're not sure what, if you're not sure if you're going to be able to succeed, then find your advisory board, your people, your team that will give you support and knowledge and encouragement to succeed in whatever you decide you want to set foot in. And that's what I would just really encourage people to do.
I love that. So I did live. I do have one final question. Where can people find you on social media? So if people want to connect with you and watch the amazing things you're doing, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, so there's two places. They can I do a lot of posting on my LinkedIn, more so than I do my Facebook, on a lot of projects and works, and even thoughts that I have around the work I do. So if you just look me up under Carolyn Alessi, you'll find my LinkedIn pretty quickly. For the work that I do with Million Women Mentors Connecticut chapter, we do have some social media handles. On Instagram, we have at MWM-CT. And then on our Facebook, we have MW Mentors with an SCT. And so you can find us that way. And then on LinkedIn, it's Million Women Mentors Connecticut chapter. And so if you want to follow us, we post a lot of different things on there as well. And then we also have an email distribution list. So if you email me at millionwomenmentorct@gmail.com, we can add you to our e-newsletter that we send out monthly. And then any other work that I do, you can follow Trinity Health in New England.
Yep. Well, Carolyn, I feel so blessed. I know you're one busy lady. So thank you so much for the time. Thank you for that wonderful evening where we had the chance to meet. And I'm just feel so blessed to be in your presence. Thank you so much. Thank you to your audience for being with us today. And I will see you soon, everybody. Bye. Have a good day.